It's time to start. So welcome to the Emerging Leader session. It's a very innovative session, I think. It is first from the Melbourne meeting. We have, I'm Dr. Henry Wong from South Korea, the chairman of ARCCNM. My co-chairman and the first speaker is our honorous, respectable president of World Federation. So would you please welcome him to the stage with a big applause.
So the topic that Henry asked me to present was on how to do international collaborative research. And I've been very impressed during the meeting, particularly coming to the sessions relating to the last session from the fellows of the Asian Board of Nuclear Medicine. Here we go. As to how we're lifting the profile and the training of our young nuclear medicine and scientific professionals. And what I thought I would do is just give a little bit of an overview of my perspective on where we need to be going next in order for that to be more successful. So I think that once we have the basic tenets right, that we have the ability to conduct the imaging and therapeutic studies at our institutions at the appropriate level of quality and technological advancement, and that our clinical knowledge is at a level that we feel is appropriate and contemporary. It really does give us an opportunity to move forward with research. And we know that research is the driving room for innovation, and it also allows us to interact much more importantly with our clinical colleagues. And that can range anything from scientific research, if you're at an institution which has chemistry facilities, although I do remember as a young trainee and doing gastric emptying studies back in the 90s that I once freaked out all of the technologists in our department because I insisted on bringing in a 1 litre beaker and having a pump and making some egg and putting it in there and doing an acid infusion and putting some enzymes in there just to look at the stability of the label to the egg itself. You don't have to have hot cells and everything else in order to do innovative research. And then when I went to Memorial, worked with Homer, I found that they didn't know how to make scrambled egg for gastric emptying studies. And so I used to go out to the deli outside to buy the ingredients, bring it back in the department, then make the meal and then give it to the patient. And this was when I went to New York to learn how to do things, so I was telling them. So you can do it at a small level, but I think clinical research is where we have a really huge opportunity. And this can be everything from retrospective cohort studies that we all do routinely as part of our audit activities within our departments, through to prospective clinical studies. And I want to touch probably mostly on prospective clinical trials as an exemplar of how you can bring your research to a certain level and then engage in a countrywide and international collaborative level. And just at the end, I'll touch a little bit on drug development. Sorry. So we all are very familiar with FDG, PET-CT, and when I was young and a trainee and went to Memorial, it was to learn PET, because we didn't have PET in Australia. And in those days, it was only used for neurology, cardiology, and brain tumours. That was it. And so we were just starting to understand what the implications were. And even though there's substantial evidence, and in most countries approval for a range of different FDG PET indications, for example, not every country has all the indications approved. I mean, in Australia, we're still struggling to get breast cancer approved, for goodness sake. And that's an ongoing, long process. But there are even areas where you can think about what are the questions which relate to clinical practice in which there is not substantive evidence in the literature. And it can be anything from just looking at, treatment response to localised therapies, whether it's stereotactic radiotherapy or any type of local or systemic therapy. You can identify niches where there is a gap in knowledge, and you can design a protocol, talk to your colleagues, and implement a multi-centre protocol which can be within your country and internationally. And certainly when it comes to non-cancer indications, infection, inflammatory disease, there are broad indications where you can utilise this, and Mike and his colleagues and the wonderful program we have in infection and inflammation at this conference provides examples of that. You can even look at evidence-based data acquisition. And this is just an example of a way in which you can simply put together some forms and you can gather data in a way which can have a significant impact. So a few years ago, when gallium PSMA was being introduced in Australia, and it is in many of your countries, we wanted to know not if you could do it or if you could actually analyse the images, but what difference did it make to the referring doctors? You know, how were they going to use that information? And there is now established methodology that you can use in order to be able to evaluate that. And so essentially we had these forms, and we can provide these forms to any of you as templates. And looking at management intent, we've even had companies come to us now through ArtNet, which I'll talk about briefly, which is our clinical trials network we've established in Australia, to ask, can we get access to these? Where you simply record, you know, what type of cancer they have, what's the stage, you know, what's the restaging information which is available. And then you ask the referring physician to fill in a form. And this form has everything relating to, you know, what type of treatment is planned. Is it for systemic therapy or targeted individual therapy? What do they think the stage of disease is? And what are their plans for treatment? And they don't get the scan until they give you the form. And they initially complain, but then, you know what? They just do it. Then, afterwards, you send them another form which has the information of what the scan shows and how their management has changed. Now, in this particular study, we found that in almost a half of the patients, there was a change in management. And you may say, well, what difference does that make? Well, from a regulatory perspective and from a health economics perspective, it's a huge thing, because governments and payers won't give you money for a test unless you show it actually has an impact. And with this small study that was done, it was prospective, 4 sites, we had a paper accepted in Journal of Nuclear Medicine, and it was accepted on the same day that it was submitted, without change. I've never had a paper accepted the same day, never had a paper accepted without change. And Paul Roach and Ros were the leaders of this particular study. I was there sort of, you know, encouraging them and pushing them along, but they did all the work, you know, and you can have impactful studies simply by gathering that type of data. And it can be multinational, okay? And I would be strongly encouraging all of you to think about doing this type of work. Once you have networks established with your friends and colleagues who can do these types of studies, money will come. Once you learn how to do these types of trials, you can write grants. This is an example of a Movember-funded study. Have you all heard of Movember, or some of you have? So Movember is a prostate cancer foundation. It has fundraising activities in about 25 countries around the world. It just so happens its headquarters is in Melbourne. But in each country, it raises millions of dollars, and it's used solely for prostate cancer research in that country. So they have had some programs looking at imaging, and they sent out expressions of interest. And in this particular study, where we looked at fluorocholine and PSMA, there were 5 sites around the world in the US, UK, Canada and Australia who put their hands up and said, we'll be involved. They provided the money for everything: data management, image acquisition, analysis, everything. These are pivotal studies. And so it is possible to find this money if you've got a cohort of patients, you've got people that know how to do trials, and for those of us who've done this sort of thing before, if you need help in writing grants or proposals, all you've got to do is ask. I spent half my life reading other people's grants and protocols. So, you know, there's many senior people who are happy to help you if you've got these ideas. A key part of this is extending your networks into proper clinical trial networks. This is what our oncology colleagues, our cardiology colleagues, neurology colleagues, they all do this. This is starting to happen. In Australia, we've created a clinical trials network that now has 3 multi-million-dollar prospective multi-centre trials funded. Okay, everything we've put in, we've got first time. Okay, you've just got to create the networks. This can happen in developed and developing countries, and I would urge you to think about this. And the reason it's important is that if companies aren't going to develop a particular diagnostic test, we have to do it through investigator-initiated studies. Big companies will fund some of them, and also the therapy studies, most of them, not all, but otherwise we need to do this. And the reason we need to do it is not just to get papers, but because if we want to get funding, we have to generate the evidence. And the way health technology assessments work is that you have to be able to show that you can diagnose the condition or impact on the management of the patient, and you then have to look at economic outcomes. And you then say, well, how do you do that? This is how you do it. So when we put in our recent breast cancer application for FDG into Australia, we had to come up with this, which is a decision tree. These decision trees are based on clinical practice guidelines. They're very similar, whatever country you go to. And in order to put these together, you have to have some health economic input. You only need to do it once, but then you say, okay, according to standard practice, you then will go from, if I think I've got equivocal disease, I do a PET. What's the stratification of likely positivity? And then what's the treatment likelihood? If you don't do a PET, what's the likely clinical strategy? And then, get ready for it, you plug it into this. And this is where you say, at an individual country level, how much do each of these tests cost? It doesn't matter if the costs are different. You just plug it into the decision analysis. And by this, we were able to show in patients with recurrent or metastatic suspected breast cancer, an FDG PET could save you almost $8,000 per patient. Now, if you've got the sensitivity, specificity, management impact, economic benefit, and outcome change, that's an HTA. You provide it to your government, and then they've got something which is equivalent to any therapeutic application that they might have. So all of these things can be done. All you need is the templates. In doing this, you need to be able to link together. I think that as young emerging leaders, you have the potential and the energy to do it. People like Henry and I can help you with this, but we're not going to do the work. You do the work. And then you get the first author papers, you do the presentations. And then eventually you'll be mentoring people in the future as well. So last point is that once you get to a level of maturity, you can start getting into the really cool things where drug companies will come to you with new molecules and they'll say, we want to know which patients to give it to. Is it working? Is it trafficking? You know, what's the deliverable concentration? And then, you know, this is just one particular molecule that we studied that we got a paper in Clinical Cancer Research, and there wasn't even an editorial where imaging as a key element of drug development will then follow. So these are things that you can all be involved in with time. So that's all I wanted to say. Collaborative research is about understanding the options and possibilities. Think beyond where you are at the moment. Once you know that you're capable of doing the tests, how can you use that to see what the impact is in your patients? Get enthusiastic friends and colleagues to work with you, and you'll be able to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Scott. Our next speaker is, we invited two speakers from European Association. The first speaker from EANM is Professor Jolanta Kunikowska, who is the Secretary General of EANM now, and she'll present the EANM activities.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, we must answer for the question, who is young? Because this is the question which is the most important. And of course, we are scientists, and we must find the cut of volumes. And we find in the NM that this our young is under 8 years old. What we are doing for them? We have the students membership, which is the free, and we have this for these young doctors and for these young scientists under this 38 years old. We have this junior memberships up to 5 years, and it is reduced up to €19. And we have during the Congress Young Daily Forum activities and awards. We have the school, and we have involved this young to the committee. What is the structure now in the NM? As you can see, there's more than 300 members. Our ordinary our members is the young. This means that is 50%. And our personal way. As you can see, this is I and my collector Roberto, that we started our career in the NM during this first young investigation meeting. It was in 2009. It was the oncology. And my colleague will be going for the deeper in this, our activity. what we're organizing now during the Congress, we organize this Young Daily Forum. Why we decide to stress about the young during the Congress? Because as you can see, it is 2 times more the young our colleagues is participating during the Congress. That is our ordinary members. And this, our daily forum is a lunch symposium, and it is 1.5 hour time slot during the lunch, and it is very interactive, and it is done by very professional way by this facilitator, Lord Shepherd. And last year it was the 3 days presentation. The first was about this skills workshop. The second was about the networking, how to build your professional relationship. And first, this last day, it was how to be stronger. For this Congress, for the Düsseldorf, it will be next 3 topics, the same kind of this activity for the young. And as you can see, it is always very well participation. And you could see that it has a lot of the people young in the body, but you could see that they say the young in the mind too. Because it is open for everyone, not only for the junior members. And during the Congress, we have the award for the young. This is a lump sum 3,000 euro, and it is up to 5 grants for the youngs. And that year, during the Congress, we'll be organizing this presidential session. It was in the past, but that year is the first time it will be with the best young paper. And our daily work, and our main activity for the young, this is the school. And probably you know that 2 years ago we changed the idea of the school for the European School of Multimodality Imaging and Training to focus about this and about this multimodality, because exactly this is our nuclear medicine world. And this is the 3 levels. Level 1 is the basic. It is free available, it's with no limits. The second is the school, and the third is this high-end courses. And level 1, you could go for our website, and it is free for everyone, not only for the members. And it is a CME recording session during the Congress. This is webinars, and this is the teaching database that you could use it for your teaching. And SMIT School, this is face-to-face meeting. Last year we organized 2 schools. That year it will be 3 schools. The first was in the Bergamo, second will be in 2 weeks in this beginning of the May in Ghent, and in the autumn school in the Belgrade. This is always 4 topics, and each of the participants could choose 2 topics, and it is for 1.5 days training about exactly this kind of these choosing topics. And level 3. Level 3, it is high-end courses, and we started to organize that year, and you could see that it is the list. It is for this advanced knowledge. And this is our learning line. This level 1, you could do when you have the time, use your iPad, use your iPhone, Android, because you could follow for the internet. And this e-learning, this webinars now is changing and will be cutting for the 7 to 10 minutes that you have free times. You could follow for this. And level 2 is face-to-face meeting. That means that you have the possibility to change your idea, to meet with very, very high level and expertise doctors. And level 3 is become your local expert in your area.
The next speaker will be Ziting Li, Secretary General of the World Federation, talking about activities of young doctors in Australia and New Zealand.
So I was asked to give an overview, I guess, of the activities of young doctors in Australia. And as Ajit mentioned, it's not easy to actually get that information, but we're actually very lucky that I was actually able to assemble some statistics about our training sites for our young doctors in nuclear medicine from our Australasian Association of Nuclear Medicine specialists who coordinates our training and research in nuclear medicine in Australia. So with that, I'd like to actually thank them, the Secretariat, particularly Anne, for giving me these statistics. Now, in terms of core training sites, we do have 48 core training sites, and you will notice that a lot of these are actually on the east coast of Australia, with mainly in Queensland, which is up north. We are down here in Victoria. There are 13 training sites available. In New South Wales, which is where Sydney is, there are 12. There's one in Canberra, or Australian Capital Territory. Queensland has actually got 13. You can see there's none in Northern Territory because they're only just putting in a department there now. And Western Australia's got 3, and South Australia's got 4. In terms of the last 5 years, really, there's been an increase in the number of training sites, and this jump here in 2016 has actually been due to a large number of sites being put in Queensland, which has resulted in this increase in training sites. And how does that actually compare with the number of nuclear medicine centres there are in Australia? Now, whilst this is a few years old, you can see that generally it is actually distributed along the east coast of Australia as well. And therefore, it's actually quite similar. But when it comes to the activities of nuclear medicine specialists, how do we get there? Well, first we need to go through the training, and then there's the post-training aspect, and then that's where we are here today to see how we all become emerging leaders. For the training pathways, there are 2 tracks to actually get to become a nuclear medicine specialist. Firstly, as physician trainees, or radiology trainees is the other option. As physicians, we need to have the registration, of course. We do need to complete our basic physician training, which includes a written and clinical examinations. And then we need to be appointed to accredited advanced training positions in nuclear medicine. All training is prospectively approved and signed off by the Joint College of Training Committee in nuclear medicine, with a minimum of 3 years of advanced nuclear medicine training. This can be in the form of pure nuclear medicine training for 2 years, and then of 1 year of non-core training, which can include a research year or other specialties such as cardiology or endocrinology, and so on. With radiology trainees, they also need to have completed part 2 of their radiology training before they actually can be appointed to an accredited advanced training position in nuclear medicine, which has to be accredited by the JCTC again, and then they need a minimum of 2 years of training after their radiology training. And that's the 2 core years of nuclear medicine. End of training requirements sees them needing to have completed a basic science course in nuclear medicine, which includes a very intensive 3-hour examination. They also need to be exposed to bone mineral density in some form or another, either by attending the course carried out by the Australian-New Zealand Bone Mineral Density Society, and then that's followed by an examination, or by completing 200 BMD scans in their department. There's also continuous assessment programs where they need to complete written assignments each year of their core training, 2 per year. So it's only in their core training years that they need to do that. Pediatric nuclear medicine training, a minimum of 20 days in an accredited pediatric center. For PET training, there's a minimum of 500 PET oncology cases, of which only 100 may be pediatric or adolescent PET scans. They must do a research project, but just this year, they've brought in a recognition of prior learning in trainees that may have done a previous project in the field of nuclear medicine. It could be whilst they're doing their cardiology training, if it's a nuclear medicine related project that they've done, that could potentially be recognized as a project as well. For physician trainees, they also must attend a cross-sectional anatomy course run by the ANMS at least once during their training. For next year, the College of Physicians has just approved the JCTC's proposal for revamping the pediatric training and also introducing some new radionuclide therapy training requirements. I haven't got any specifics on this because it's still actually being thrashed out between the committee and the college. So after we get our training and we get our letters, what do we have to do to maintain it? There's continuous professional development that's carried out by either the College of Physicians or the College of Radiology. In the College of Physicians, it's 100 credits a year. It can be in the field of either, in either practice review and improvements. You can see here there are different number of credits per hour. Can be in assessed learning, educational development, teaching and research, group learning, and other learning activities as well. So we do have to complete this on a yearly basis, and there is a random audit that can occur at any time. For the College of Radiology, it's a minimum of 30 CPD points per year, but they do need to complete a minimum of 180 CPD points every 3 years. This can be in the form of professional and clinical governance, teaching, training and supervision, self-directed learning, research publications and presentations, attendance of meetings as well, and also maintenance of professional standards. There are caps also to individual categories so that they can't just do everything in the one category. And after that, what happens? Well, historically, a lot of our mentors and our seniors have actually gone overseas in order to have their fellowships either in the US or UK or other developed countries in the world. But currently, really, everything you can find overseas, we can get actually comparable or greater opportunities here in Australia, and a lot of people are actually coming here to have their fellowships done as well. And the senior leadership in Australia does provide hands-on support and opportunities for collaborations. You've just heard from Andrew in terms of what is possible, and a little outline of that has actually been evident as he has just shown. And also to encourage us and support us in terms of being principal or chief investigators of multi-centered clinical trials as well as grants. You would have heard from Professor Brian Schmidt yesterday about the importance of inclusiveness, and particularly in publications. That's also something that is promoted here in Australia, and also provided employment opportunities in universities and hospitals is just a few things that is available. There is, of course, ongoing mentoring and support for post-trainees. The JCTC, Joint College Training Committee, does actually mandate that we have 1 to 2 recent trainees within the committee of 8, so that we can actually bring some fresh ideas and fresh blood to the committee to see what we can do to actually keep the profession training fresh. And also, obviously, on the society boards and committees, such as the ANZ SNM, ANMS, and even ArtNet, where Ross is chairing that. And of course, with the World Federation as well, I can only speak for myself, but I think fair to say I'm probably one of the youngest, if not youngest, Secretary General of the World Federation, but also in the past as President of the ANZ SNM as well. I was also one of the youngest back then too. So with that, there really is a lot of opportunities here in Australia. It's a matter of us stepping up and taking advantage of it, and going to our mentors and making sure that they're actually ready to help and waiting for us. So, and we're actually looking forward to engaging further with the Emerging Leader Program of the World Federation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ziting. And the last presentation just in this particular section is from Juliano Cerci on activities of young doctors in Latin America. We look forward to his presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Henry, for the opportunity of being here with you all. So I just discovered with Iolanta information that I'm actually in the crisis. I live in a identity crisis, so I'm exactly 38. And probably this reflects the way I'm dressing today, because I'm not the cool way that Joshua here, the young cool guy, or Luis there from Chile, and not the way that Henry elegancy way dressed also. So I'm kind of lost probably. So my part is to cover the Latin American, and Latin America is a huge area covered from the Mexico to the end with Chile and Argentina, and it covers a huge area and a lot of people. And one of the things of the Alice Bean Point and the Latin America is that it has the highest levels of income inequality in the world, and this is probably one of the biggest problems that we have. And despite all the strong economic growth and improved social indications observed over the past decade, we still have a lot of things to do. EIA has been published many good data about Latin America, and this map shows exactly the difficulties we have in such a huge area with inequality of number of equipment per million of population, and Brazil is not that good even if we have the highest number of equipment in the area. Also, it's about PET-CT and PET systems reflecting all this diversity of the presence of equipment and also of nuclear medicine physicians. So there are about 2,000 nuclear medicine physicians in the region, and the number of physicians per cameras vary between 0.5 and 2.3, and the average is 1 physician per equipment. And Brazil has almost half of the number of the nuclear medicine physicians of Latin America. We have 915. And this is solid data from the Brazilian Academy of Medicine. And as you can see, almost 37% of our physicians has less than 40 years old. So most of us are young. And the threats of the nuclear medicine are well known and basically reflects the problems that we have in all the world. It's all about reimbursement, technician crisis, the regulatory boards, the costs, and the nuclear medicine information. And of course, threats might be challenges, and challenges might be opportunities for young people. And with all those challenges we have in Latin America, we have the possibility of the young people to show up. So the young doctors' activities in Latin America are related to education and training, research, regulatory requirements, quality management, and reimbursement. And here's Luis, that from Latin America received a grant to come and attend this meeting due to his excellent research and his good approach to his academic life. I would like also to call attention of Osvaldo Garcia from Mexico, that is the chief of the nuclear medicine department of the biggest site in Mexico, and he is performing a lot of research with so many types of radionuclides, and he is this young guy leading this big team. So young people in Latin America are doing a good job. We also have space for these young guys to play a pivotal role in regulatory requirements, building up evidence. And this is Cristina Matsushita from Brazil, and she's leading the Brazilian Nuclear Medicine Society PSMA project, building up all the evidence for the regulatory board to approve the utilization of PSMA in Brazil. Also in quality programs, there is José Armando Cortés, that is the leader of the Brazilian Nuclear Medicine Society Quality Program, that is a joint commission with the Brazilian Society of Radiology. And of course, the space for research and publications is also so much relevant for our societies, that this building up this evidence is what will make the coverage for the studies that we are currently performing and willing to perform. And I think Andrew was quite good in his show up, and this remember my formation when we published cost effectiveness analysis of PET-CT in patients with Hodgkin lymphomas, which led to approval of the utilization of PET-CT both in public and private sector. So this kind of collaboration and publication opened the doors for the young to be promoted in the Latin America. What we have to remember about the nuclear medicine market size in the Latin America is that is one of the most highest expected growth compared to Europe, compared to Asia, and compared to Africa. And we expect to grow 10% a year. And this was quite good data showed yesterday by Diana in her excellent presentation. So there are plenty of opportunities for young professionals. We have bright professionals, young in Latin America, all over there. Of course, there are so many possibilities, and funding for our research is not as easy as here in Australia, as Andrew showed. And of course, IAEA, ALASBIN, and the World Federation are possibilities to collaboration and open the doors for combining efforts for all this research that is needed and required for us to grow. So this was all. Thank you so much for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Giuliano. Now it's time for panelists. We have 5 panelists. I'd like to invite them all in the front chairs, and Professor Scott will lead that discussion.
So while everyone's just coming up, I think we've had some really excellent presentations giving perspectives from the different countries, and hopefully that will stimulate people to have questions for our panellists here. Okay. So I guess one of the things which struck me with the presentations is the enthusiasm. Firstly, the enthusiasm that everyone has to try and continue with developing both the careers, the technologies, and the research interests of emerging leaders. I think all of us were a little bit taken aback when we heard the definition of 38, because as we all get older, we think that the definition of young sort of rises. How did you come upon 38, by the way? That's probably the main question the panel would probably be interested in hearing about.
I didn't know it was before I was the secretary. Because I think that it was the long discussion how to define what is this age. And 35 it was not so good. 40 it was maybe too old.
So maybe we could think upon a definition of young as being 38, but I think emerging leaders continues on. You could easily argue it goes into mid-40s because we're all learning as we continue on in our careers. But I was wondering if there could be perhaps some comments from the panel, and maybe Mike could start as well, because we know that Africa is an area where developing of nuclear medicine is really a challenge. As it is in Asia, Oceania, Latin America, and many other countries. But I wonder if you have any reflections to share, Mike.
No. Thanks, Andrew. Of course, what is important and key is, in fact, to focus on education. And education is key, and the training has to be standardized, which is what we are trying to do in Africa. And fortunately, the IAEA is trying to help us in that, and by sending people to South Africa. For instance, you might be seeing some of the attendees that are here. They're not necessarily originally from Africa. Giuliano, you said you have a crisis of 38. So, I have also a crisis. when everyone that is attending a meeting, it's either your student or you have exam, and you know it's about time to prepare for pension. So everyone that is so what is happening is that we actually have a system wherein we have a curricula that is moving along and it's dynamic, but we involve the trainees themselves to actually, in fact, be part of it. But with it, we also try and start to change that. You're not going to qualify if you don't have a research component, because then they have to actually be research-wise and they have to be able to attend meetings such as this ones. And the other thing that, whilst we are still a little bit disorganized, what do we do with our regulators? We teach our trainees that they obviously have to be responsible. Responsibility means that they obviously have to be leaders, but in that they must have trust. But the definition of trust in what we inculcate to them is it's that they have to be competent, they have to be obviously having the integrity, and they clearly have to have issues of reliability. You don't want the system of Africa being known that, okay, is the system going to be open or not? Because that will actually take nuclear medicine down, and we make sure that they really cannot do such things. And we are trying, and then it's getting there. Of course, in terms of integrity, they clearly have to communicate what they have said and promised to do. But clearly, we don't want people that are just nice people and they want to be referred to because they are nice. We want them to be really extremely competent, and we are really making strides with that. Of course, we do have, by virtue of that competency issue, we do have problems of the high failure rate at the moment, which we are also working with, but we obviously don't want to make the standards lower, but also that doesn't mean the high failure rate means the standards are higher. So we have to really balance it well. And in so doing, we think that the multiple collaborations, the World Federation, WOMF, will obviously play a key role. So one of the other key things that we are starting to do is to also write our own guidelines for the continent in South Africa. And in so doing, we in fact give the youngsters the opportunities. One become the corresponding and author, and then we get the youngsters to write the things, because then they become happy, and once they get the virus of writing, they really shoot on and they become great ambassadors in their own countries. And that system, we think it is going on well. So we don't have a specific a program that is set, it's the youth program, but we obviously via our congresses that is biannual, and wherein people from the continent come. We have a session before the congress that is a week before, for instance, people like John Bascombe, Hans had been there as well, they will actually run that. And then also during that time, we also have the college, which is the equivalent of the Royal College, running courses that may help them to pass the exams. So in that way, we are, that's the ways that we are trying to push our people.
Okay, very good. I was just going to ask Jean-Luc if he had any specific comments to make about the presentation so far, but I guess one other question as well is that the programs which are being developed by the regional societies and associations and the Asian Board of Nuclear Medicine and the fellows of the Asian Board of Nuclear Medicine being one as well. But what's the importance, do you think, also of mentorship and engaging or spending time in other institutions as making a difference for people when they're trying to get on that trajectory? Or any other comments you may have?
We had last November in Montreal a retreat, and we entitled, we gave the name of Next Gen to the retreat, Next Generation. Our concern was, like everybody else, is that the board members were made of people who are baby boomers. And the major challenge that we have, and we had in North America, and I'm assuming it's pretty much the same in the rest of the world, is basically to engage the new generation in the era of social media, in the era of Facebook, of Twitter, and so on. I'm not totally sure that we have tackled that aspect properly, that the baby boomer have reached out, and it's very difficult. I have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, like most of us, but I don't use it. I don't know how to use it. And the last thing you want is basically have your name across the world, not necessarily in a very nice way, published on TV and so on. Zuckerberg, as you know, Mark Zuckerberg is 31 years old, and he was in front of the Senate and the House Committee recently because of the hacking. of 86 million. So that's one of the major challenges. Now, the other challenge that we have is basically job markets. And if you look at North America, it's basically, I would distinguish three areas. One is Quebec, and Quebec is very privileged because in Quebec, you can basically practice in one specialty. You have to choose. You can have bazillion of board certification. And then you have English Canada, which is basically based on the American model. And in the American model, how do you want to instill and teach and coach a leader in nuclear medicine who can, to a radiologist who can practice nuclear medicine after 6 months of training, but they take 3 months of vacation. So we're doing the 6 months of training. It's big challenge. And I agree. I mean, most of you have said that therapies is probably, I call it the renaissance of nuclear medicine. But the challenge that and we need to do a great job in teaching the radiologists, since it's going to be the vast majority in English North America, to do therapy. The problem is that they're not necessarily very much interested by it. So the approach that I have taken is basically to engage the radiology community and defend the fact that doing theranostic is actually to radiology what interventional radiology has been to radiology. By taking that approach, I would hope that the radiology community, which is the vast majority in North America, will somewhat embrace. And they embrace something when they see market share.
Yeah, dollars.
So the challenge to me is not only nuclear medicine is well established, your journal, so educating in nuclear medicine is not complicated. The complication is how to engage the youngster to practice nuclear medicine. And if you don't have many people interested, you're not going to be able to identify a leader in nuclear medicine. I don't know what we have in store with them, but clearly 2007-8, the catastrophe of the NRU and so on did not help at all. So I have more questions than answers.
Please do.
Yeah. So I wonder if I could ask Ros to make a couple of comments, because you're probably closer to the magic young number than everyone else who's on the panel.
I think not as close as I look, though.
No. So maybe you could just give some reflections on the presentations and also some of the comments that have been made.
Use the microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, the microphone? Yeah, so I think in particular with Australia, just starting with Australia, I mean, I think it's been actually fascinating seeing the difference across the world, and it is actually different challenges in different areas. And for me, in fact, that was an amazing part of this presentation. Challenges, but opportunities. And I think that that was very apparent, and that there are some areas that we could actually help each other with. And that was also very apparent, I think, from the presentations. And I guess along that line, I have been very interested in research. I had the opportunity to go abroad and do quite a number of years in London, and I think that that really helped me as a young person with pursuing research and understanding that this is how things are done differently elsewhere in the world. So Ziting, I know in your presentation you said that in Australia there are plenty of opportunities, but I think as I've come back to Australia and part of the environment, I think the problem is because there are opportunities, there's less motivation for some of the young people to travel in the way that many of us did. I think the travelling gave that breadth of experience and confidence to come back and pursue other opportunities. And the problem with our training program, it is very comprehensive, but people are then ready for a job and then moving immediately into work, and actually worried that if they travel, they may lose an opportunity. And we've certainly seen that people sometimes have travelled and then their job they thought they would get have been given to somebody else. And so they see it as a, you know, and it's a financial disincentive because they're paying for their course. They actually want to complete multiple years of training and then go straight into the workforce. And I think this is a problem that we face. I actually think we have a problem of invigorating the younger generation to enter a career which has a little, you know, less certainty of being immediately employed. and that's a problem. So if there were opportunities where you could have a limited time fellowship overseas and you knew how long that would go for and come back, that might regenerate, might be a cooperative area. And in terms of cooperation, I think Andrew mentioned, certainly I think these cooperative trials networks are an amazing opportunity and an opportunity for us to I think we've done well in a short period of time in Australia because we've been highly cooperative, but I think there's great opportunities to cooperate across countries. And I think particularly, as Andrew said, maybe things like protocol sharing, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or sharing components of what you're doing in research, like the questionnaires or like the study setups. So you don't have to really reinvent everything. A sharing mentality is key. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you. And please, if anyone in the audience has any comments, Fred?
I really enjoyed this session, and but I probably, we have more questions than I have answers. but as you say, and it's I think very hard for young people, particularly we're talking about emerging leaders, to be able, the problems that we are coming up with are getting bigger and bigger, and rely on a lot more people to be involved to try to solve those. And I find as when you get to my part of my career, I know more people and more people know me, and I have many opportunities to collaborate. Too many sometimes, right? But I think that sometimes when you're young, you get so focused into what it is that you are working on that you don't take that opportunity. Maybe you do, but take that opportunity to network. So the opportunity of our Latin American colleague to be able to get this grant, to be able to come here and see what other people are doing, and hopefully make some contacts, around the world, so that we can get these kinds of collaborations, of opportunities that these people are working on this that's cool, that touches on what I'm doing, and being able to have the opportunity, a lot of people who come to these conferences, again, have gray hair, to be able to get more young people to have an opportunity to come to these conferences in order to make the kinds of connections, not have to wait until you're 60 years old to be able to have these kinds of opportunities. I think that, and how do we do that? Maybe it's the new social media will allow that, but I don't know whether it's quite structured in a way to allow you to make those kinds of meaningful kinds of connections that allow you to move forward. And happy to hear what the panel has to say about any of that.
Yeah, maybe if I can. Jean-Luc.
One thing that I think we have to consider too is that the newer generations are very concerned about their lifestyle. They want to spend time with their family. They want to raise their kids. And we have the old generation, the baby boomer, sacrificed a lot in terms of their family. And we definitely have to pay attention. When we engage youngsters, they always ask us, is there something which is already carved out that we can join? We don't necessarily want to carve out something. So pretty much you have to put them on path. They're not going to define themselves or path, because takes too much time away from their family. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I often get asked that, and I tell them, you're asking the wrong person, because I have quite a lot of children, and I still manage to get to where I am. So, yeah, we won't go there. So I would be interested in some of the other panel members making comments, but I would make one reflection as well, which is also going back to what Fred was talking about, because there are different expectations, amongst all of my kids, and they range from 17 to 30, that they are very different in how they approach life in general, and as they get older they realise they probably were goofing off a little bit too much earlier on. They should have worked a little bit harder. But there is often one common theme about leadership, and this is an emerging leader session, and I think you'll find that most of the people in the room and also elsewhere who've achieved a leadership position have usually had at least one person who's been a mentor to them, that they can say, this person really helped me. Or there's a couple of people, and that experience or that time there's made the connections for me that have lasted for the rest of my life. So for me, for example, it was going to Memorial for 3 years, and the people that I met there and specific mentors I had there then lasted for the years and years after that. And so when encouraging people as to where they want to take their careers, there will be the vast majority who want to just go into practice and just make money. But if you want to have leaders, they need to be given opportunities. We need to help them with that. But I just wonder if perhaps the panel would like to make any comments on, how important that is in ensuring that people can achieve a trajectory but maintain on it, as opposed to, going out into private practice, having a great lifestyle, but having no aspirations to continue on.
I think the role model is key. I think you're absolutely right on that. And my approach is always the 15-25. If you can identify somebody who is 25 younger, 15 years younger than you, and set it on a path, coach him. And you have to teach people to become leader. Some are born leader, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
And still, if you're born leader, you still have to be on path. 15, 25 years, I think that, and then you try to coach, and you select 1, 2, or 3. So I love to have people who are 20, 25 years old, 15, it usually depends which age you are, and then you put them on paths and hope for the best.
But I must say as well, the youngsters, I don't think they should have one mentor as well. From their side, they should have multiple mentors, because the other one fulfill a different role and the other and so on.
Yeah.
But one of the other things that we could help the youngsters with, it's really yourself as a president, and for instance, in my continent, the entire continent doesn't recognize nuclear medicine as a specialty. So that's our role as the stewardship is to come to really help them out. And in so doing, then with the guidelines that we are speaking about, then it will actually empower them to actually go there. We cannot say go and fight, but we actually don't tell them how. And that's important.
Yeah. Joel, did you have any comments you'd like to make?
Andrew, I have to apologize for not quite understanding beforehand how the session would run.
Sorry.
So
I didn't know either. I think we're making it up. But anyway.
I had actually prepared slides.
Oh.
And if I can use 2 or
Yes,
3
of course.
minutes.
Please.
Come.
Otherwise,
come.
my thought. All right. I will get to the suggestions to the young leaders. But before I do that, I want to, in 2 or 3 minutes, use the opportunity that Giuliano gave me when he said how heterogeneous Latin America is. And I want to tell you a story of a young group of people, and I'm the oldest. I'm 52, but we have this group for 15 years, so Giuliano was much younger than 38 when he joined us. And how can we do things in nuclear that can be a story of success, not only to the group, but to the patients, especially. So I'll tell you about a registry that we started building 15 years ago, this young group of physicians, in this city of Curitiba, which is a Latin America city in southern Brazil. And if you look at this work that we ran from the IEA many years ago, you see how heterogeneous it is, the utilization of nuclear cardiology, for example, in the world. Latin America in general has a very low utilization of nuclear cardiology in most countries. But this is not true in the city of Curitiba. And I'll show you what we have been publishing in terms of utilization of nuclear cardiology procedures in the Curitiba, and we are much closer to the numbers that Europe uses, which is approximately 800 MPIs per 100,000 patients per year. And this is a population that really needs, because 33% of our studies are really abnormal. So these are usually appropriately indicated studies, several degrees of abnormalities. And this is possible because of a registry that was built. And this, I'll come to the opportunities the young people have. And if you pay attention to this WHO data, Brazil is one of the top leaders in terms of cardiovascular disease mortality. But when we look at Curitiba, this spot in South America, look what's happening. This is total mortality, and this is premature, below 70 years old mortality. And I'm not implying here that nuclear cardiology is directly responsible for this, but what I'm saying is when you apply technology and apply other things together with that in prevention and all of that, and this is a tremendous opportunities for patients. And when we compare Curitiba over the past several years, to Brazil, mortality in Brazil, very high. Curitiba in Switzerland, incredibly, but Curitiba could be a practice in Switzerland in terms of cardiovascular disease mortality. How do we get that? Multimodality integration in terms of the imaging, multimodality integrated, reading different professionals working together, lots of education of young people, fellows, and then I come to the final word for you, which is young leaders. You have to deliver useful work. You have to deliver quality work. You have to keep up to date with the current knowledge. You have to participate, in this case, which I'm talking about nuclear cardiology, in cardiology meetings and clinical discussions. You have to explore the opportunities to participate of regional scientific meetings and give talks if possible. Build relationship with referring physicians, which is extremely important. Know the strengths and weaknesses of nuclear cardiology where you practice. Explore scientific cooperation and other specialties institutions cooperation. Explore opportunities to do research and publish, extremely important. And if possible, be proactive, helping healthcare providers, public, private, with protocols and publications such as the ones Juliano just showed you. Thank you very much. Sorry for this.
That was a fantastic presentation, and I think resonates with a lot of what we've been saying, and thinking onwards to not just being able to do the studies and the research, but how it can impact on clinical outcomes for patients, and then to convince our regulators and healthcare providers that this is useful investigations. Ajit, you had a comment?
Just a comment, actually. This works? Okay,
yeah,
great.
It's working, yes.
Right. Just drawing on all of what you all had actually said, just a couple of interesting points. I did my training in 2004, started my training in nuclear medicine in 2003, actually, and most of my colleagues, I actually got into the medicine and pediatric rotations too, and they were like, why are you taking nuclear medicines? It's got a whole lot of gamut of uncertainty in your career. Nobody knows what nuclear medicine is doing. Nobody knows what interpretation of nuclear medicine is like. Why don't you take radiology? Radiology has been up there for the past 10 years as the topmost nuclear medicine training program in the country. And just now in 2018, once the postgraduate results are out, you will not believe that radiology is still on top. But nuclear medicine has climbed to the top 5 posts in India as a training specialty. And that means the top 5% of the top 5 ranks which are going out in the country for postgraduate postgraduate training programs for medicine is taken by nuclear medicine physicians also. So according to that, the impression that the older generation has given the younger generation is that nuclear medicine is an extremely impressive field to be in, and that's why they're here, because they're looking at all of the people who have been there doing excellent quality of work, good amount of research work, something exciting happening. PET came and did a lot of things to change clinical management and a lot of things. So the impression that youngsters like me, and would like to give even more youngsters, and we have some of the people from our committee in the Society of Nuclear Medicine India itself, is that the youngsters believe that they can do a lot of work here. The idea is to guide them and motivate them to do it. And one of the key things that I also want to touch upon what Mike said is that it wasn't a single mentor that did anything for me. It was, actually I have interacted with majority. I've trained under her in Poland. I have come to you with my doubts. I have gone to Bangladesh. I have gone to Mike. I have gone to almost everybody. I have approached Professor Baum here and so many people. So everybody is possible. Everybody has the capability of teaching something. And the idea is to just keep looking at them and asking questions and asking for help. And that's the one thing which I think youngsters have to be motivated to do today, is just to open your avenues of knowledge and keep asking for help. And for example, as an example, in 2012, one of the scientists which we met at a conference for BRC stimulated all the work that we've been doing for the past 6 years, just a single scientist meeting. And in 2030, Professor Padi from Warmth came down to my center to introduce rhenium. And after that, 5 years later, we're doing so much of work, and we're actually training other countries to do rhenium work. And right now, we've started a training program in nuclear medicine. We do a whole lot of collaborative work with IAE, and we're talking about a private center. I'm not even a government center where I get funding for all of this. I mean, I'm in a private center. We hosted 2 World Rhenium conferences. We have IAEA training sessions because they're all open to collaboration. All you have to do is write an email and ask them. And taking from your presentations and other presentations before, I definitely think we in India will look at a clinical trials network, and we will be collaborating with you. And this is just my comments on what has been happening. Thank you so much.
I think that's a wonderful summary, and we hope that that there'll be many more people like you, Ajit, who'll be out there in all the individual countries pushing ahead, and we're just sort of sitting back and smiling and waving and saying, you're doing a great job. I just wanted to ask for one more comment from Jung Jun Min, who hasn't had an opportunity to say anything, and then we have some presentations to conclude the session.
Okay, so let me talk about some giving opportunities to Korean Society of Nuclear Medicine. And recently, the KSNM revised the regulation about the council member eligibility to make the more young the members can work on the council committee. So now, actually, the largest members were on the age of 50 and 60s, and now the largest age is in 40s, and the range is 30 to 60s. So our society, KSNM, is working very hard to get our society younger and give more chance for young members to participate the kind of legislative activities in our society. So during this session, I'm concerned about some participation activities for the young members. So I have a question to Jolanta about EANM. And you make a lot of programs for young physicians. So what's the participation rate? So in Korea, many young doctors are very busy, and they have a lot of burden of the clinical obligation. So if our society makes some event and some kind of a meeting and some programs for young doctors, but we are always have some concerning about the low participation rate. So do you have any strategies to raise the participation?
As you saw during my lectures, that the participation of the young doctors during the Congress is very, very good, because it is the 50%, it's more than 600 of this young doctors coming. The SME schools is dedicated for
I think he says you must speak to the mic.
This SME school is dedicated for these young doctors, and it is usually about the 80% feeling by these young doctors. Of course, this definition of the young of the NM, this 38 years old, it is only the definition, because everybody could participate. If you are older doctors, but you want to improve your knowledge, to renew yours, you could go for the school. But the 80% is the young doctors, and as you could saw during this Congress, this youngsters meetings. It was started 3 years ago. It was in the small rooms, but for each Congress, you must have the bigger room, because it was not the place for them. Now I think that we're going on the good way for the young people, and for the social media, of course. During the Congress, they have the application, because they are usually for going for that, and I think that it is the way for going for the young.
Okay. All right. So we might draw that to a close for the discussion, but I would, if I could ask the following people who are actually the successful recipients of the World Federation of Nuclear Medicine Biology Emerging Leaders Travel Grants to come down the front, and we'll be able to have a photo and give the presentation. So if we could have Zinat Jabin, Narges Ayati, Luis Salazar Vargas, Ismail Lawal, Gil Boshomani, Najma Batul, Carlos Victor Braga Rodriguez, and Wowo Mong So to come to the front of the stage. Thanks. So these are the young people who have been defined and selected as emerging leaders. They had the highest ranking abstracts of a group that were nominated by their societies and regional leaders, and therefore are recipients of these travel grants. So congratulations to everyone.